Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Several people sent me this article, and it is an update of a story I did a while back. This version is from the New York Times, sent to me by both David, Keith, Josh, Greg, and Kevin. Both. But Ford can be sued in states where accidents occurred, according to the Supreme Court. Ford raised one of the dumbest arguments I've ever seen raised in a courtroom, and I've seen some dumb ones. And this one was bizarre, and a lot of people who were watching this, including myself, were saying, I can't believe they're pushing this one as hard as they are, and they're going to lose. They're going to lose. And, so Adam Liptak wrote the article, and the Supreme Court made it easier for consumers injured by products to sue the manufacturers. The court ruled unanimously that local state courts have jurisdiction over lawsuits filed in the consumer's home states, notwithstanding that the products were made elsewhere or sold elsewhere, so long as the manufacturers did substantial business in the state. So the case arose from two different car accidents. They were just similar facts with respect to this legal issue, involving vehicles made by Ford Motor Company. In one, a person was driving a 1996 Ford Explorer in Montana when the tread separated from the tire. Remember that story? Talking about the tire tread separation issue that they had a while back. The vehicle flipped over into a ditch, and the driver died at the scene. Her estate sued Ford in state court in Montana. In the other case, a man was a passenger in a Crown Vic on his way to do some ice fishing in Minnesota when the driver ran into a snowplow. The passenger side airbag failed, and the passenger then sustained serious brain damage, and a lawsuit was filed in the state court in Minnesota. Now, we're not discussing whether or not those are valid lawsuits. That's actually a different issue. The point here is, assuming it's a valid lawsuit, where must it be filed? So one was filed in Montana, where the accident occurred. The other one was filed in Minnesota, where the accident occurred. Ford argued that those courts lacked jurisdiction because the company did not have a relevant connection to those states. The vehicles were designed in Michigan. It had manufactured the Explorer in Kentucky and sold it in Washington State. The Crown Vic was manufactured in Canada and sold in North Dakota. Now, the cars both managed to wind their way around, and cars often do that. They do have wheels on them. The Supreme Court has long said that corporations may be sued for all purposes where they are incorporated or where their headquarters are, and they may be sued if the plaintiff's claims arise out of or relate to the defendant's contacts with the state. So the question is, does Ford Motor Company have any contacts with Montana or Minnesota? Do they? What do you think? Ford is incorporated in Delaware, based in Michigan. They argued that its contacts with Montana and Minnesota were insufficient to confer jurisdiction on their courts. And in case you're curious, Ford has been sued both in Montana and Minnesota countless times prior to this. And for whatever reason, they just decided, oh, you know something? Let's challenge this one on those wacky grounds. So the court said Ford's activities in the states provided ample reason to let the company be sued in them by every means imaginable, such as billboards, TV commercials, radio spots, print ads, direct mail. Ford urges Montanans and Minnesotans to buy its vehicles, including Explorers and Crown Vics, at least at the time that those cars were being sold. She wrote, Ford cars, again, including those two models, are available for sale, whether new or used, throughout the states at 36 dealerships in Montana and 84 dealerships in Minnesota. And apart from sales, Ford works hard to foster ongoing connections to its car owners. The company's dealers in Montana and Minnesota, as elsewhere, regularly maintain and repair Ford cars, including those whose warranties have long since expired, she wrote. And the company distributes replacement parts both to its own dealers and to independent auto shops in the two states. Those activities also make Ford money. And by making it easier to own a Ford, they encourage Montanans and Minnesotans to become lifelong Ford drivers. It did not matter that Ford made or sold the particular vehicles in other states. This was an 8-0 opinion. The one justice, Barrett, did not participate because she was not there when the case was argued before the court. There was some discussion about whether or not they all agreed on the exact same reasoning as to why it would happen, but they did all agree that the cases against Ford can proceed. So, interesting thing about this is that in the lower courts as they're coming up, Ford actually argued and said that it might be appropriate for the man injured in the Crown Vic to file his lawsuit in Canada because that's where the car was manufactured. You can see the problems that creates. It's bizarre. When courts look at where a lawsuit should be filed, I'm going to get right down to lawsuit 101, my friends. This is pencils and paper. Start taking notes. Lawsuits can be filed often in more than one location, but there's going to be an appropriate location for a lawsuit to be filed. So if you and I enter into a contract, okay, let's suppose you live next door to me, and we both live in the same county and the same town, in the same state, obviously. And you and I enter into a contract, and one of us alleges that the other breached the contract, okay? A lawsuit can be filed over the breach of contract, most likely in the nearby courthouse, because that's the one that has jurisdiction over where the two of us are and where the contract was executed. So a lot of statutes that discuss where lawsuits should be filed talk about certain things regarding the events that lead to the lawsuit. So if a contract is created and entered into between two parties, they'll often say that you can file the lawsuit where the contract was created if there's a specific spot you can point to. And then it'll often say that the plaintiff can sue the defendant where the defendant resides. So let's suppose that we live in two separate counties. Okay, I live in one county, you live in the next county. I'm going to sue you for breach of contract. I can almost always sue you where you are. Okay, and you might think, who cares about any of this? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is a lot of smart litigants realize that if you can sue somebody in an inconvenient forum, so let's suppose that you live in Texas and I live in Maine. If I can sue you in Maine and make you come up here and defend the case, you're going to spend so much money traveling back and forth, and it's going to be such a pain in the butt that you're probably going to go, I wonder if I can get the case moved down here or if I can settle the case. So there are actually people who put into contracts a forum clause. It says if there's a lawsuit arising out of this, it's going to be argued in a particular court. It says right in the contract. And sometimes those are enforceable, sometimes they're not enforceable. But the point is that they're trying to get around that, or they're trying to actually lock their position in now. And so I've seen it before where a lender based in Michigan that lends money to people all around the nation says, if you got a problem with us, you're going to bring it in Oakland County, Michigan or Southfield District Court, Michigan. Take your pick. So if they lend you money and you are in Alaska and you want to sue them, you got to come to Michigan to do it according to the contract. So the contract actions are fairly easy to figure out where that should be filed. But there's also, personal injury cases, auto negligence cases, product liability cases. Where do those get filed? And more often than not, the statutes that address this, and most states have got statutes on it, although I suspect some states might have case law on it. But in a case involving a product liability where there's harm that was caused to somebody that was, caused by a defective product liability, they're likely going to say that you can, one, sue the defendant where they are. That's almost always the case. So if you wanted to, you can come to Michigan and sue Ford in Dearborn where they are. Number two, they'll often say, or you can sue where the harm occurred, because that makes sense also. So you're sitting in your driveway working on something and a product fails, okay? And the product injures you in your own driveway. It would make sense to say, yeah, you can file a lawsuit in your local court. Now, some people are going to say, why? Why does that matter? Well, if you think about the logistics of a lawsuit, what actually happens in court, witnesses come in and testify, and there's lawyers there, and there's judges there, and there's court reporters there, but witnesses have got to come in and testify. And so if you think about a case that's got 20 witnesses, how many of them come from right around the area where the incident occurred, or how many of them come from far, far away? And most of them would actually be right in this area. So to give you an example of the lemon law cases that I handle, the lemon law case witnesses are going to be salespeople, mechanics who worked on the car, and my clients. Well, my clients live nearby. They bought the car nearby. And all the mechanics and the salespeople are at that dealership. And so to suggest that, oh, well, even though all this is happening here, we think you should file the lawsuit over here. Now, Ford's never raised this argument in a lemon law lawsuit that I'm aware of. So I'm not saying they would do that. I'm simply pointing out that if you got injured in your own driveway by a defective product, likely most of the witnesses are going to be local. You know, the first responders who came to help you, the first people on the scene, your neighbor who ran over to help. These are all people who are local. And if you had to file that case in Canada, when you live in America, and all these people have got to travel to Canada to be witnesses in a Canadian courtroom about what happened to you back in America, that's an absurd prospect. So in this day and age, Ford Motor Company, yeah, they're a Delaware corporation. And we all know that that's a fiction. That's something they did on paper a while back for some reason. Ford's been building cars in Michigan ever since he first came up with the idea about building cars with his name on the car. And so Ford also has a presence in all other states. And I'm even willing to bet you that Ford Motor Company has got a resident agent in all 50 states, because I know that they've got one here in Michigan. And if they're in Delaware, I don't have to send all my papers to Delaware to serve them. I serve them here in Michigan. So I'm not sure why they did this on these two cases. It's possible that they were worried about gigantic verdicts in these two cases, but Ford must get sued all the time. So it might be that they just thought, hey, something, let's try this and see if it works. Because if they could force all personal injury cases to be brought in the towns where the vehicles were manufactured, cars are built all over the place these days, and that would cause the plaintiffs to be, filing actions all over after figuring out where the cars are built. And as we also probably know, many of the sub-assemblies or the component parts of the car are manufactured in one place and shipped someplace else for final assembly. So if the defect is in the part or the sub-assembly, do we then bring the action where that part came from? Or can we file the lawsuit where the thing was assembled? And by the way, how do we figure this stuff out? Is that really part of my job to figure out? Okay, I know final assembly is listed as being in Kentucky, but is that really where this entire thing was done? Or is there argument then going to be, oh, by the way, the infotainment center actually was assembled in Japan, so you may have to file your action over there. It was a crazy defense. Me and my friends who talked about it were reasonably certain this was going to happen. Weren't expecting a unanimous result. Unanimous results from the Supreme Court are usually very rare. But New York Times, Adam Liptak wrote it. David, Keith, Josh, Greg, Kevin all sent it to me. Ford can be sued in the states where accidents occurred, says the Supreme Court, in a common sense, Mr. Obvious kind of ruling. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. So, Steve, why can you tow a piano but not tune a fish?